7 o'clock, meeting called to order. Good evening, folks.
Good evening.
Not used to doing this in front of an audience. We have a busy night, so we're going to start with Karen Pritchard, who's just going to review the results of the Adaptive Building Reuse Committee. And this was in response to our discussion on tearing down the police station.
Yes.
And what we were looking for is kind of an overview of what's happening with all the town buildings, so we can have a bigger picture before we just start saying, yeah, we're gonna tear everything down.
Sure. First, before I start, could I ask you what all your names are, since I don't know you all?
Sure.
So I know this Anthony.
Anthony Antino, I'm the liaison from the advisory board.
Thank you.
And I'm Frank Nash.
That's Frank.
Chris Karsha.
Joe Gibbons.
Jack Whitaker.
Thank you. So actually, there were two committees, and stop me at any time. So we started out in 2013 with the Public Facilities Master Planning Committee. And the primary, and both of these, I brought with me the final presentations just for reference. These presentations are on the town website under the Scituate Adaptive Building Reuse Committee. The final presentation for that committee, as well as for the Public Facilities Master Planning Committee, they're all posted on the website. But in any event, the Public Facilities Master Planning Committee was created by the Board of Selectmen to assess what the condition of the buildings, the town facilities were. And we were tasked with doing an examination of pretty much all of what I would call the major buildings in town, although not all of the schools. We looked at Gates, but we were asked to look at Gates, Town Hall, the fire department, police department, and the library, and the Council on Aging buildings. We had a very robust committee. You know, we were all volunteers. We were fortunate in that most of the volunteers on the committee actually have real estate experience, and some were engineers and others were architects. So we had a really interesting group of people who did this assessment. We went building by building, we did tours. We ultimately asked the town on our behalf to hire an engineering firm to do an assessment of this complex. But suffice it to say that we were pretty surprised by the poor condition of these buildings. We have loads of pictures, but in particular, in the police station, you know, none of it met ADA code for getting around the building, which isn't such a big deal now that we're going to replace it, but it would be a very big deal if you were ever to consider reusing it, because it would be almost impossible, in our opinion, to bring that building to code, because the building's built out of concrete block. So moving anything in that building is just about an impossibility. It's great if, you know, you want a bomb shelter, but not so great if you want to reconfigure a building to make it, you know, usable for modern purposes. So that building, in addition, had a lot of decaying material. It clearly had, in the basement, it's got the box step firing range, which we didn't have access to. I remember at the time that we did the tour, the building also had as I recall, this was one of the things that most horrified me, is it had the server rack that from which the town communicated with the state police for all 911 calls. The server rack was about 2.5 feet away from an open sump pump pit. So we, you know, and all of our wires and cables and all that stuff were kind of up on a desk, and it was just, you know, something that had been patched together over years and years. Our applause to the folks who've worked in that building and made things work, given the fact that they had made things work by patching things together. So that building was just given the way it was built, given the condition that it was in, given what the needs of the town were, it was like a complete no-brainer to say, the committee say unanimously, this building is not suited for, in our opinion, any purpose in the future. And we looked at the police station, fire station, house number 3 next door. It too has a myriad of issues. Chief amongst them, for purposes of reuse, is that all the floor drains in the garage are blocked off, and I guess they were at one point in time. I don't have the specific particulars, but my understanding was they were blocked off because there was a drainage issue going someplace else, but consequently, you've got a pretty limited, probably environmentally legal use of that property going forward unless that was mitigated. The building's also in pretty rough condition in the people's space, lots of crumbling material, all of which would have to be tested for asbestos and whatnot, given the amount of decay in the building. So that was in really cruddy shape. This building in decent shape, but again, if you take a little wander downstairs, you've got a spaghetti stream of stuff, hanging wires, and decades worth of stuff that's been patched together, no AC, heating in the heat in the winters, in severe weather, pretty inadequate. And at that point in time, although it is different today, the town's computer room, if you will, the MDF, or what we call an MDF or IDF in the business, was actually in this corner of the building, in the hottest part of the building. We're on a summer day. It was 7 degrees in that room, and you'd actually have to shut the equipment off so it wouldn't fry. So, these are 1955 buildings. The town didn't build them. The town built a lot of stuff back in the 1950s, didn't build much after that, and have kind of patched together what we've had. And as a result of that, we're kind of in the situation where everything was coming home to roost at one time. So we did look at the school. We did not spend a lot of time in that committee looking at the school, other than to say, I shouldn't say that. We did look at the school. There had already been a study done by Durkee Brown for the town that looked at what would it cost to renovate the school as a school, and/or what would it cost to renovate the school for multiple purposes, which we looked at in this committee. And, that property or that building, by all of us who looked at it, and by the engineers and Durkee Brown who looked at it, looked to be, from a structural perspective, actually in really good shape, needs a new roof and all the things that would need to be replaced over a period of time, but the building itself is actually pretty impressive. So our final comments to the Board of Selectmen in, I think it was in November of 2014, was the following. We said that the library, which was already well on its way to being approved, should be renovated, could be renovated, or could be renovated and expanded, but the understanding was that the renovation and expansion would happen. That was actually already had a head of steam. We did believe that the new middle school should be built, and that the building that we had in place at Gates was not well-suited to be renovated and/or expanded as a new school. And we then also said that we felt that we absolutely needed a new public safety complex, that this police station was in no way suitable for continued use as a police station, let alone really anything else. We felt that we looked at two options about town hall and a new senior center, town hall, at the Gates School with possibly a senior center. We had a few recommendations about how that might look, and we tried to do our best guess at what it would cost us to kind of compile all of these projects in total. I would say that I would hope that we had some hand in convincing voters who had heard about this work, that and as well as the Board of Selectmen, that one of the projects that really needed to happen was the public safety complex. And we were, as a committee, really happy when that eventually did happen. We were also very supportive of the school being built. Both of those facilities take us from something that was, I think, pretty abysmal in terms of what our resources, our faculty, our employees, and what the townspeople had to work with to something that will be modern and should last us for many decades, provided that we spend the money along the way to actually take care of the assets, which is something we don't have a good history of, in the town. So before I go on to the Gates project, do you have any questions?
The scope of this review, the Public Facilities Master Plan, why was it only limited to just the Gates School and not all the schools in town? And was this an entire town facilities study, or was it just?
No, well, Patricia might be able to speak to this better than I, but our understanding was that the Gates was in scope for looking at this project, in scope for this committee's work, because the Gates School was under consideration as to whether or not it could be reused if, in fact, the town did vote to replace it with another middle school, which is why it was included. So it was a way of saying, we have in the town a lot of property, and we have to make a decision ultimately about, how much property do we really need? How much in the way of facilities do we really need to manage the town's business? And ultimately, what's the most economical way to do that, as well as what are the properties that make the most sense in terms of having the benefit of kind of mutual enjoyment for the town. So Gates was included. This complex was included, and the library was included, because they all are properties that we all touch every day. Gates, not so much, but would be once that school decision was made.
I guess, according to the agenda, this is supposed to be town facilities, so Kevin, if you want to kind of pull up here and join the conversation.
Absolutely.
And Kevin was a very important part of that committee, so embellish away.
Do we have an overall plan for all of the schools and all of the facilities,
Type of
as far
plan,
as
like
a
a
maintenance,
five-year capital
five-year
plan?
maintenance plan, or any, what's going on?
We have a 5-year rolling capital plan on all the town buildings, and including the 6 schools.
And is that under facilities, or is it come under
Under
schools?
facilities, and on the school side, it's worked with facilities and the superintendent and the business manager.
So, let me just clarify to Karen's point. All the school buildings are under the control of the school committee.
Right.
So the charge, when the Board of Selectmen created the master facilities plan, was for town buildings that, had for years been brought to their attention in terms of needing to be addressed. Gates was included because if a new middle school is built, then the school committee votes to turn it over to the town, and then it becomes a town property. So that's why it was included in the scope.
And I would also like to add that in our assessment, I don't want to leave off, it was one of the smallest buildings, but it's actually one of the most important buildings. In the discussion is we did look at the senior center, and it didn't take too long to come to the conclusion that that building was not suitable for its purpose, probably not suitable for any other purpose in town, and that it would have to be replaced at some point.
Can I ask a question? At the time, the consultants were working with John McCarthy and his staff and his committee to look at the 3 options for a new Gates school. They considered building an entirely new school in back of where the police and fire station is now. They considered what they decided to do, the new wing on the high school. And then they also considered essentially tearing down the existing Gates school, possibly keeping the front facade as a sentimental thing. But they had determined that that building was in deplorable condition and needed to come down. And so I am somewhat surprised to hear you describing it as, I think you said fabulous building or amazing building, like that somehow we could keep that building.
No, I
Where the
didn't.
determination was made then, it had to go and be raised and perhaps could be the site of the new middle school. And people decided for a lot of reasons they'd rather have it up here. So how do you square those two?
So, I
And I have
would,
another question about schools, and it
Can I-
bothers me a little bit, this dichotomy about the town buildings to school buildings. My understanding, and maybe it's wrong, is there's going to be something like 84 more apartment units built at the Greenbush MBTA station fairly soon. There is, of course, the project up across from the new police and fire station. And then there's the perennial Gouldston project, which apparently is starting to be a real possibility. So we're looking at possibly 300 more housing units just from those sources. There are lots of nice new houses being built all over town, but what that means is more school children. And I wonder if we will not, within 5 to 10 years, have a need for an entirely additional elementary school. Not a refurbished one, but one more. And if the site for that might not well be the site of the current Gate School, or if not, where else? And it bothers me that we don't seem to have the school plan, as I've kind of outlined it, built into things like a senior center, the town hall, which is, wearing out, and so forth. It should all be of a piece.
So if I may, Jack, answer the first question.
Yeah.
So what I said about the Gate School is that the structure of the building, in our opinion, was actually very good. I didn't say it was fabulous, but I said it was very good. There's nothing that we saw that would indicate that there were major issues with that building that could not be addressed in a thorough renovation. It was not, however, a good building for a school, and the problems that were inherent in the way that school was built and added onto over time made it a particularly difficult building to reuse as a school, which is why, and I think Rich is here. You can chime in if you'd like, because I wasn't on that committee.
Actually, I believe during the ground, we did the initial evaluation, said it was going to take somewhere in the vicinity of $30 million to renovate that school to have it used.
As a school.
And it still wouldn't have really met the needs of the educational system that we had in mind
I remember
at that
that,
time.
yeah.
Right.
And so the idea was that that's throwing, good money after bad when it's not even going to meet our needs if you put that money into it. The bones of the building, I believe, are still in very good shape, but it would take a significant renovation to use that building.
Yeah.
Well,
So the building is structurally sound. And that was done before the master plan committee was even formed. The building is structurally sound. For an educational purpose, it was completely inadequate. As part of the MSBA process, in order to be eligible for funding, the building committee had to look at renovating that building as an option instead of building new. There were 16, I believe, Rich, options on the table at one point. So to state that, that was looked at and it was recommended to be raised isn't entirely accurate, because it was one of the options looked at if we wanted to build on site. But the building is structurally sound, just a really poor
Yeah, there were a couple of
educational
on-site
facility.
choices. One
Yes.
was to build the building right along the fencing on the right-hand side of the building, and then tear down the other building, of course, after you built the new building. Part of it was somehow some form of keeping the front like you suggested. There were a lot of different possibilities on that site, but none of them really seemed to fit what we thought was the...
Yeah.
And to bring your point up about the elementary school, there's a committee that will be starting very soon to look at the elementary schools and to decide how we're going to organize them in the future. Because as you're talking about population shifts, we had a large demographic study done last spring that gave us some really, really solid information about the future. Even with these buildings going on, even with this new surge in building going on, so what we're trying to decide is, before we start really investing huge amounts of money into some of these buildings, how many do we need? Can we do something better with what we have?
Yeah.
Can we build maybe one super elementary school and close some of these? These are the things we're starting to discuss with you.
I'm really happy to hear that. This is interesting. Chairman of the Selectmen is asking my permission to speak.
I was asking the chair, just to answer
Chairman.
the question, Jack.
Yeah.
Just so you know that, the other difficulty you run into is all these proposed projects that have been slated to be built. So for example, Scituate Woods, which is on Stockbridge Road, originally was like 150 units. They've been whittled down to like 70. It's almost 15 years since it's been approved. Nothing's happened. You get down to Herring Brook, which is off almost after PJ's Country House before Kennedy's. That was 10, 12 years ago, I think 10 years ago. There were somewhere around 50 to 60 units has yet to be built. You've got Goulston's property, which originally was 250 units. Then it actually passed, but they opted not to do it due to the economy, and now they've come back with a housing plan of approximately 90 homes. And now I've heard through the grapevine that now maybe they're going back to the drawing board and thinking maybe duplexes or condos, the number may multiply from there. You've got the Livingstone and Callahan property from the land swap. They're proposing like over 200 units, 250, 225. The difficulty that we have in the town is, while we see those numbers and we can potentially see them coming down the pike if it's economically viable for them to do it, they still have yet to be built, and they haven't pulled the permits to do it. And so, knowing the numbers, you're right. If they're one bedroom, then that's going to be beneficial from a town perspective because they have to have a school issue potentially. But if you're having homes with 2 to 3 bedrooms, then you do have to factor in that number because potentially that's another child in the system. That's hard to project because I would have thought some of those would have been built years ago, and they haven't.
Piggybacking on what John was saying, our demographic study found something very peculiar about Scituate, is that people don't want to leave Scituate.
Yes.
A lot of these neighboring towns, when people reach a certain age and their children leave, they leave. That doesn't seem to be the case as often here in Scituate. So a lot of these homes don't have children.
Yes. But people my age may opt to go into some of these nice new smaller apartments, and then you got a big house for the family coming in. But anyway, it's tricky, very tricky, I know. And, thank you, that's all very, very informative, appreciate that.
I have a question. Mr. Kelly, have you ever looked at the so-called Habib report? It was a report, it was a survey done of all the school buildings. I think Sean Harris probably remembers it, called Habib report. It was a report done, they did a survey, condition survey of all the buildings and had recommended, it's a very, very good report. It probably can be used in some of the deliberations of analyzing buildings, but the town has spent quite a bit of money on it, and so I thought it was a very, very well-written report. They analyzed all the school buildings, and it came up with recommendations, things that needed to be done, so on, and prices and everything.
Okay.
I don't know where it is now.
So, Anthony, that report's about 18 years old, and it was made available to every consultant that the town hired, particularly Jerky Brown, when they did the Gates review back in 2011, I think. But you're right, it was a great report.
It is, and a lot of useful information. Probably outdated by now, but not all of it.
Yeah, I know.
In fact, they implemented some of it in the Gates School itself. I remember that very well.
I kind of bring this back into focus. As far as facilities go, what do we have for capital projects in the next 5 years? Or what's in the pipeline? Is what, started this discussion was we were talking about $250,000 to tear down the police station. And we kind of wanted an idea of what else is in the pipeline moving forward.
Well, I don't have the school 5-year capital plan with me.
Which, is that what covers the roofs over at Hatherley? Is it Hatherley that has the roof leak?
There's roofs on there,
Yeah.
there's boilers, there's windows, there's a lot of exterior components, because in the older elementary schools, those are the things that are most compromised right now.
Right.
There's field work, there's parking lots, driveways. We've done a lot of the boiler work in interior, energy type work as part of the ESCO. But as far as building envelope, I know that there's a lot of that on it. A lot of roadways, sidewalks, ADA accessible issues.
So it's more of a school department thing than anything.
Yeah, I'm concerned. I've had Hatherley parents approach me about the roof at Hatherley. You're probably well aware, when we had the rain in the last month, there were buckets in every classroom in the upper wing in Hatherley. And I, in good conscience, can't support tearing down a police station, spending $250,000 when we have roofs at 2 of the elementary schools that are leaking like sieves. I can't support that.
I mean, it's it's two very different things to us as far as, the Hadley School. They did spend considerable money on the roof itself, on the pitched roof and on the front part of the building, and did all that. And then there are compromises and issues on the back part of the building where the additions are and so forth. I'm not aware of buckets in every room. I know on the back side of the building, they had some leaks in those classrooms.
Thank you.
And we have you have the quote for the demolition on that, right?
Yes.
All right. I saw the breakdown in here. Do you have anything else as far as facilities go?
Just briefly to second what's already been said about Hadley and the other elementary schools. I'm a Hadley grandparent, and I see exactly the same thing, and I hear from the parents. And that is that the roof is in deplorable condition. I mean, even little things like the front entranceway is disgraceful. They blunt about it. It's all chipped. And that building has been let go, but it also reflects many of our 1950s buildings in this town. This one we're sitting. They've been allowed to deteriorate. And I don't mean that as a criticism of any of you people who are on the boards or directing departments. It's something that's been sort of endemic in Scituate. I've lived here almost 40 years. But the buildings just don't get that day-to-day renewal, adaptation, and maintenance that you would normally see. That's just a little lecture to go along with.
Well, we just replaced all the doors.
A lot of complaints from parents in the schools, and
I know there are concerns there, and we do address them as they come in on a daily basis, and then the bigger ones are rolled into the 5-year rolling capital plan. We did just do all the doors at Hadley, including the whole new storefront, and there was roof work done at Hadley and Cushing on the main buildings, and there was some oversights on the back part of the building. That's a fact. And we're dealing with that now, making repairs.
And the other thing I'd say, Mr. Chairman, about this complex here, you got the police station, which seems to universally be agreed is at best useful for maybe the 4 exterior walls or something, if even that. This building, I think, is not much better in the long run, nor is the fire station, from what I'm hearing, is that these buildings should eventually maybe all come down, or at most be radically gutted and reused. And I still think that is generally what you're saying about the Gate School. You are talking about the skeletal structure and so forth is sound, but that there would be substantial rebuilding. And all I'll say, I'm retired. I worked for 5 different state higher ed systems and did a lot of building committees. I've yet to see a successful retread of an old building. It generally doesn't work out well. And versus just starting first of all with what do we need, and then what shall we build, and then building, versus going the other way of what can we do with this old building. Doesn't always work all that well. And I'll just shut up because I'm talking too much tonight.
Just one question. With the new public safety complex, it is replacing the fire station and the police station. Do we have plans? What are we planning to do with that building?
Right now, Station 3, it's in discussion, and it's basically nothing but everything is on the table. It's not suitable for use of vehicles or those types of things. We do need swing space as we go through a lot of these transitions and change buildings, so we will be using it temporarily as some storage type issues, but it will not be used actively for any vehicle work or vehicle use or vehicle storage.
But we don't have any plans on spending money to fix it up or flatten it at any time in the near future?
I have not worked on anything like that, no.
Good. Anything else as far as that goes from you?
No, I'm good.
Anthony?
Don't we still have a public buildings committee or something? We used to have one.
That's him.
That's him.
That's you.
No, I'm not, the Public Buildings Committee is a different group.
So there was a master facilities plan committee,
Right.
and then that dealt with the things Karen spoke to. And then the board appointed another committee called the Adaptive Reuse Building Committee to deal with the issues we're talking about right now. What happens when gate is vacant, to really look at the senior center, because that's the next thing on the master plan, is to really see how we're going to get our seniors in a facility that meets their needs, and we've already done a lot of work around that. The Public Building Commission, Anthony, which you're referring to, builds buildings. So they've been meeting every other Tuesday for the past 3 years on the library and the public safety complex. And then there's a separate school building committee for the middle school.
So Karen, thank you very much.
Welcome.
I think it was helpful.
Thank you very much.
We still have to talk about Widows Walk. But I know you have prior engagements. Thank you for coming.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I get to go cha-cha-cha. Wednesday night dance class.
Nice.
You can get your husband to go cha-cha-cha, that's a pretty good thing, right?
So Kevin, last we spoke on Widows Walk. You
Can I
had,
spend 2 more minutes on the police station?
you can
Just-
serve as much time as you want on it.
Well, I don't want to hold up.
We brought a lot of paperwork she wants to show us.
No, I think it's really good for the committee to see what the inside of the existing station, how it's laid out and how it's presented, and it's one of the reasons that we're proposing to take the building down, because when you go into the building, the building was never designed, yeah, we have a few pass around if anybody wants to. The building was never designed for public use. The only thing that,
it's inaccessible.
when you go into the front of the, when you enter the building, which is right here by dispatch is the front door. So the building is this way facing the street. But once you go into that hallway at dispatch, and you take left, you have to get buzzed in to go through that door. And then once you get in there, those corridors are only 4 feet wide.
Oh, yeah.
So we're instantly faced with, handicap accessibility issues.
Right.
And then that middle pod in the drawing, which shows interview rooms and bathrooms, the walls around that are all structural walls. They're all load-bearing walls. So if we did any changes, we would have to do something there, and it's just not, it's not foreseeable at all. It's just, the building is built as a bomb shelter. And then you look at the offices, they're very small in the way they present themselves. The bathrooms are very small. The area that is the cells is actually, it's a walk-up ramp, and it goes up to the second floor, and that's not reusable for anything at all. The basement is not accessible, and it's old storage. There's an old firing range down there. So I think this gives a good snapshot of, the building does not present itself well for good use moving forward.
I heard at one point, the cost of the cell, if the cell tower ever had to get moved, that's not a town cost, but the power going to it is ours? What's,
I do not know.
relocate electrical supply to cell tower?
So the new public safety complex bounces microwaves from Carolina Hill
Right.
to this tower here, and had to have an extra tower put on this one out here so it bounces to the new one. So we still maintain that facility. If we wanted to move the cell tower, the cost to do that would be on the town. It would be approximately $600,000 in 2015 dollars.
The electrical distribution to the tower does not go through the police station. Originally, there was discussion of that, but we verified that is not the case. It comes off the back street, the back of the drive. But if we do take down the police station, then the radio communication systems are all in a server rack in the basement of the police station, and we would have to relocate that to a small shed, which used to be a sand storage shed. The building's already there.
Still storage shed.
Still, sorry.
I set it up, so I know.
So we would use that But that's part of the cost to take the building down.
There's also another vacant shed on that property because one of the tower operators pulled out. And so there's adequate space, as Kevin said, to relocate from the basement into those sheds. So, yeah.
I'm happy with the police station discussion.
Great.
Good, thank you.
I'll quickly go through Widows Walk.
The last, we wanted more supporting documents about the HVAC system and the quote you got.
So, when Bob was here presenting his budget, this should be one for each of you. There was question on that because we had budgeted $90,000 to replace the existing HVAC system. So, since that discussion, I've reached out to people and we relooked at the situation. And I've just handed you two quotes. One is for the clubhouse and one is actually for the maintenance building. Both systems are original. Both systems are failing and in need of replacement.
Do you want both of them?
You'll see that the total number between those two is $71,000. And then I'd like to carry a contingency of $9,000 for additional costs that we'll need to do for the building. We would be changing the system at the clubhouse to a variable refrigerant flow system, which
VRF.
I'm not a mechanical engineer.
VRF system, actually, I deal
VRF
with them.
system, right, but it's a good system for that type of building, especially with all the people in and out of the pub area, the golfers coming in and out, because you can,
They're more efficient.
they're much more efficient. You don't have to put the whole building on at 100%. One area can get more as opposed to the other. The existing system is up in an attic space. It's a typical furnace with a cooling coil system, but we can't get at it. We would have to open a hole in the building to get at it. My original proposal was to put something on the first floor of a similar nature, but since the last meeting, started looking at a couple of different things, and this we feel is the best way to go about it. And this also includes replacement of the HVAC system at the maintenance garage, which is a smaller unit. I forget what size it is. The 4-ton carrier furnace.
Where are you? You're right there. So you're changing the amount of the request?
I'd like to keep the request as it is, but I got tighter numbers than actual quotes.
That's up to you guys.
That's why we're here, right?
Go ahead.
What's the age life on something like this?
On the new system,
Yeah.
I'm
25 years.
gonna guess 20, 25 years.
So the other one didn't make it that long?
No. And the other one was taxed also. The system in the attic is, I think, 5 tons, and they added additional split units of 3 tons each in 2 locations because it wasn't enough for the entire building. So this is putting one big system, for one 10-ton system for the entire building. We have 11 tons there now in 3 separate units.
Thank you.
So you have a quote, the total is 59 and 12 is 69, 71? And that included your contingency?
No, the 9 would be the contingency, so $80,000. But we'd have to bid the project.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. What was your revised quote, Kevin?
80,
And the original was 90?
90.
But the 80 has no contingency?
The 80 does include
Does.
contingency.
Oh, okay. All right.
Phyllis has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What are we talking about for the lifespan of that building? Because I understand that, I mean, after 3 years, there's questions, or just out of curiosity? I mean, are we talking about doing a $70,000 and $80,000 air conditioning for 3 years, or?
The lifespan of the Widows Walk
Clubhouse?
clubhouse?
We'll talk about expanding it, right?
So...
Oh, there's talk of expanding.
Right, so the building, the board discussed this in terms of, we just awarded, as you know, the
Yep.
food and beverage for 2 years and kept the other options for annual. But what has to happen first, and I know folks are really interested in what happens in the clubhouse because the debt is now satisfied, but the irrigation system needs to be replaced, and that's $2.5 million. And that will take place in 2019. So depending on how the debt structure looks for that, then, and only then, can we really anticipate a massive, redo that would require some debt or borrowing. But there's been options recommended in the various studies that the EDC and the planning board's done about some sort of public-private partnerships, but we don't anticipate a shovel in the ground for any of that. Probably, I would say, and I can't speak for the board, but probably maybe 4 years, because the irrigation is going to take the debt for a while.
Okay, so you're talking 4 years.
Best, once we determine, what the best use of that is, yeah. But what's happened with the golf course, in order to keep it in the black, unlike most municipal golf courses in the Commonwealth, there's been deferred maintenance, so we want to, and some things just can't wait any longer. And Kevin was asked to prioritize. He actually had, I think, 6 or 7 on there, if you look at the rolling capital. And there were 2, I believe, that were determined to be, for patron and employees, and that was the HVAC was the one that was determined. I hope, does that answer it, Phyllis?
Yes, thank you.
The system you're getting is expandable too, right?
Yes.
Which you can-
Yes.
Yes.
I just have a question. Kevin, if that system could be reused, if something were to happen in that property in the future, if the system was still viable?
Certain components of it could, sure. Depending on the age of it and what the application was.
Mr. Chairman, could someone describe what we're talking about? Why would we do anything more than the clubhouse that's there now and perhaps put a new roof on it and paint it? What other ideas do town officers have for the Whitawalks Golf Course?
Well, in
What are we
brief,
talking about?
the clubhouse is woefully small for functions and expanded leagues, and loses a lot of business as a result of that. So there were plans developed as long as, I believe, 10 years ago to expand to that building. So it's not able to be used to what we believe is its maximum capacity because of the smallness of the facility.
We hired a golf course expert consultant to look at the market in this area, whether there is a market for, what are you talking about, a large function hall?
Those are the
Like where you could
things,
have wedding receptions and stuff?
those was part of the MAPC study that the town commissioned 3 years ago, I think.
Well, I would just like to back up a little
Yeah.
bit. Right from the beginning,
Right.
this was just the first phase of the clubhouse.
Right.
The vision was, for a clubhouse. This, there were, I think, conceptual plans to expand on it. And to your point, we've all golfed on tournaments there and have gone other places after, so it's a loss of revenue. It's not so much for weddings, it's for these tournaments that, are KSC and St. Mary's and a whole host of them that they have to go elsewhere because they can only handle 60 people afterwards. So,
But do we have any business plan, that's realistic? That actually says, okay, the market is X, the cost of doing this, the cost of the staff you'd hire, a real business plan that looks at the potential. This kind of reminds me of the ill-fated Ocean Campus Center thing. We kind of threw it together, almost did it, and then mercifully didn't. Has anybody got a real sound business plan and analysis for what might be done there that's viable, that will stay in the black?
So prior to the debt being settled on that would be
Yeah.
premature, Jack. So before the town moves forward, I think you can reasonably anticipate that would happen.
So we might look into this 5 to 10 years from now.
I think it will be sooner than that.
Yeah. And be certain that there really is a market that will bring enough revenue in. I don't know.
I think golf is a self-sustaining market, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a nice golf course now for people to go and play golf and have lunch and buy some golf balls. It's very nice, and we're starting to envision something different
Just Jack, just so that you know, I mean, right now, the revenue is going to be generating $300,000 per year. That's just people going to play golf.
Yeah.
Okay, and they have a clubhouse there for hot dogs, sandwiches, and that's it, and everything else. I think the question at this point is, now that we're coming off the bond, what's the real future of this golf course? It certainly generates money for the town, and it's a town as far as an enterprise fund goes. So the question is, what, for the town going forward for the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, what do people in the town envision for this? Is it a possibility for a clubhouse? Is that kind of the old-fashioned way now for functions after the fact? Is it going to augment the revenue? We don't know, and I have to tell you right now, sure, putting a plan together going forward, and I talked about it for the past 2 years of the committee, to take a look at the golf course as a whole, not just for a golf course, but for other uses like they do during the winter, and to see what else could be used there instead of just using it solely for golf, to generate revenue for the, for the enterprise fund, but also what else could be used for the town before we actually start putting a shovel in the ground. I mean, the things that need to be replaced right now are like the irrigation system. I didn't realize the cost of it, but there are other things just, around the golf course that need to be replaced. But you're absolutely right. There has to be an idea. Is it going to make sense to build a building? At the end of the day, well, it's a nice idea. It could be woefully too expensive, and frankly, it doesn't make sense to build a building like that just for functions after a tournament.
Yeah, we did Widow's Walk. The idea was to have a quality golf facility in town that people could use that would be essentially self-sustaining, not a revenue generator to raise money for other things. As I say, I'm retired as vice president for administration and finance at various colleges. And I've seen this movie before where people get wildly enthusiastic about a campus center and it's going to be this and it's going to be that. And they don't do that essential no-nonsense business plan. I don't mean to criticize, I don't want to sound negative, I'm not, but I'm just sort of cautioning. You've got to be really sure that that market's truly out there. It truly is going to deliver you the revenue. And you can get the kind of people that need to manage this new much more. So.
But right now, that's not a part of it.
I just urge caution, and
I said this last night.
I hate to sound like a wet blanket, I don't mean that, I'm just urging caution.
It made sense. The thing about the building was it was first only to be housing the golf courts, carts, and then they decided to change. And of course, where they put the bathrooms? The bathrooms happened to be right the best place for the view of North River. I mean, it was an afterthought when I put that thing together. And I think the town needs to take a look at that, people need to take a look at that and say, does this make sense, going forward, what's the new one?
Kevin, I think we're good.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is recreation. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Welcome.
My name's Maura Glancy, I'm Recreation Director,
Jennifer McMillan, I'm on the Recreation Commission.
and we're here because the turf field, replacement of the turf field. About 2 or 3 years ago, I think it's in 2014, we came to you on a really snowy night over at the DPW building.
Yes, talking about boats.
Well, we ended up talking about
Yes.
boats, but we talked about the turf field that night. Jennifer Vitelli was with me, and she presented and put it on the capital plan that the turf field needed to be replaced. And at the time, it was about 10 years old, now it's 12 plus, and the lifelong of a turf field is about 8 to 10 years. So that's why we started putting it on the capital plan to have it replaced. Just a brief history about it. It was built in around 2005, I believe, or at that time with the MBTA mitigation funds, and it became a community field. So it fell underneath rec as permitting it instead of the school, so it is a town field. We maintain it, we put the money back into it, we collect funds from youth groups that go in, and we maintain it as far as we can take it now, and now it's looking like it has to be replaced after I had 2 quotes given to me. They said if you don't do it soon enough, underneath will start to be compromised. So we're trying to make a plan to make this work. It sounds like the town has enjoyed it. It's one of our most popular fields in town that we permit. It runs all the time as long as there's not any snow on it. So the town has enjoyed it over the years. I've had 2 children that have gone to the school systems here that have enjoyed it. My first one didn't. She said that called her today just to get the timeline on it, and she graduated in 2005, and that's when she told me summer of 2005 that it started to be built. So she actually gave me the exact timeline. I guess that's about all that I have to say other than the quotes that I got. I got 2 quotes. One of them was from the original person that put the field in, and another quote from another company that's local. They came in around the same amount. One of them, both of them came in around 405. Another one said if you want to put a pad underneath it that's better for concussions, it would be 485.
So 80,000 on top of that? 45 plus 80
about
for the
80,000
pad?
for that nicer pad. That's what he quoted me today. That's including prevailing wages and getting rid of the old turf carpet.
So we only have the one quote in the book.
Oh, I have another one here. You want one? Well, I went out and did another one anyway, because I felt like I...
Right, you had your original quote that you put on the 5-year, and then you and Jennifer got another quote, so I think...
Actually, I got a third one. Someone came to our commissioners meeting last week, and he was promoting himself, and it came in around the same amount, so, okay, now I have 3 quotes.
So we can get all those to you.
Yeah, I will. I have one right here if you want to see it.
Sure.
Better right here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask, what percentage of the use of the field do we lease out, do we rent out?
We don't rent it out too much. I think that's why it's stayed the way it is, and we have to keep it longer. Because if we don't lease it out too much because we use it a lot. We lease it out to a lacrosse company in the summertime.
Yeah.
It's about $2,500 revenue that we get on that.
How much?
About $2,500. They use it for a week. They run a lacrosse camp.
Yeah.
Must be nonprofit too, right?
Yeah, you have to be, well, yeah, it's about $125 an hour to rent it out. It's really actually pretty economical.
Is that consistent with other fields in town?
Yes. No, not other fields in town. All the other fields in town are just for Scituate use, nonprofit Scituate use. Which is mostly youth.
So like the Scituate Soccer Club or these private groups that are using, what are they paying?
$5 per child, per season.
Can I have this?
It's hers.
Okay.
We'll get copies.
Thank you.
Did you show it then?
I'm trying to see if I have some more copies.
Are we entertaining getting that concussion pad?
Well, I talked to him today, because I wanted to make sure it was prevailing wages. It was a question that was asked this afternoon. I said, I'll give him a call. And if it was my children on there, I'd want a concussion pad, because that's just the way I think. It's totally up to you people if you want to spend the extra.
What's due to the playability? I'm just curious as to
I'm sorry?
the playability of the field. Does it make it ball bounce differently? Does it? Yeah, I mean, that...
I wish I could answer that question.
It may or may not be a good thing.
I mean, I've walked out there before, on the field, I don't know how many times, well, with graduation
So
and
it's another
just
80.
being out there with recreation kids.
Why was this
It's
now?
pretty soft. I mean, it's softer than what I used to play on. I don't know. I really can't answer that question.
Can we afford
Their
concussion pad?
technology is just growing, and I don't know.
Or is it like a good pad in your rug in your house that it lasts longer, too?
Well, that's true. That's because I compared it to the same thing to this. It's like a wall-to-wall carpet. You put a nice pad on
The
it.
cheap pad, I know it doesn't last, and...
Exactly.
She's going to get us copies.
I think concussions are, in this day and age, a really hot topic. Personally, my daughter has suffered several, none of them on the turf field, but, and I think there's a lot more awareness around it. I think anybody who played sports 10 years ago probably had concussions and didn't realize it. So, don't think it's necessarily a bad thing.
I have 3 sons that played in the field, so I know.
So Maura, can you tell me why the additional cost wasn't submitted when you gave it a
Because it
quote
was
in
another company that
November?
I went to. I just wanted to make sure that I was in the right ballpark.
Sure.
So I took it upon myself to ask another company to give me a quote, and that's when he gave it to me. I'm sorry, I should have given it to you, I apologize. That's not nice to do. But they came in around roughly the same, so I didn't think it was that much until the man told me today that the reason why there's a difference in price, he has a $408,000 price and a $484,000. And that's when he told me that's the one that helps with the concussions. I went, oh, okay.
And
Tricia, do you want this?
so the funding source is $395 out of free cash and 50 out of,
Capital stabilization, we had already set aside some funds in the prior fiscal year for the turf field.
right. To come up with
So
another
short.
80,
How much free cash?
Well, it would-
395.
Yeah, it would be 40, and I don't know if that 485 that came in from R&D Sports includes a contingency. And also, this is only one bidder, it would have to go out to bid, and it may be something that would be available on either one of the existing state contracts.
Okay.
Or as a cooperative purchasing. We just joined a new cooperative purchasing group that does a lot with recreation and playgrounds in the last 30 days.
But if you're inclined to include the pad, the amount would have to increase 40,000, which would, in the end, you have to, once you review all the plans, it may shake out and be neutral, but
Right.
there's a certain threshold for capital.
And Nancy, what percentage of that, of our free cash is that? It's almost $400,000.
Oh, of our overall free cash?
Yeah.
Our free cash was 3.2 million.
Okay, thank you.
But that's not all used for capital.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, sorry, Robert Wargo, Situate High School Principal. Ms. Glancy's done great work. I'm not sure if I'm out of order in asking this to be considered. We had some discussions about including, or is it possible to include, repair the track in this proposal? Was that a separate? Where could that possibly sit?
Yeah, that's a school capital plan that I haven't seen, Rob, so it would be a separate project altogether. The turf is run by the Recreation Department, the track is a school department, and so if it was submitted as a capital plan, we would look at that.
We see them as two separate items,
Absolutely, yeah.
but the work should be done
At the same time.
at the same time.
Right.
I think logically.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I'm not aware that the track needed to be repaired, so, or replaced, so that's a discussion we can have.
I think we talked about it 2 years ago.
Thank you.
And I'm hoping it's a lot cheaper than the $480,000 for the turf field replacement, so.
And I want to speak for Ms.
Yeah.
Clancy. She's done great work on this already. I know she has some preliminary numbers. I think it's roughly, again, more careful around somewhere between 75 and 100,000. Same thing, they're saying that if the work isn't done sooner or later, your costs will go up.
And the plan is only as good as we get submissions for, so I'm not aware that it's even been submitted in the last 6 years to be on the rolling, so that may be part of a bigger discussion we need to have. But the turf's been on the 5-year rolling for 6 years, and that's why we were able to put money away in stabilization to offset the cost of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think that's it for recreation.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are we making record time? Waterways.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Steve. How are you this evening?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So,
So, you have a couple, right?
Yes.
You have Where are you? Where are you? You're not water, you're waterways.
Waterways.
There you are. Upgrade the electrical system at Cole Parkway and dock de-icers.
Yes.
So, tell me about upgrading the electrical system at Cole Parkway.
The update to the electrical system would be design and installation of a shunt trip GFCI breaker system, so that if an emergency arose, you could shut the system down. By hitting a or shunt trip button. With a shunt trip button, or if it was some other issue going on with the electric system, the GFCI system would shut it down by itself. This is I went around the marinas last year with the wire inspector and the fire department. And we looked at the town marinas, and then we also looked at private marinas as well. This was one of the recommendations that the wire inspector made in regards to the two marinas.
I had invited somebody else to come and give some input on this.
Okay.
And we were talking about ground faults and docks.
Yeah.
And they're not compatible. Once you plug something in on a boat, if you plug the boat in,
That's different.
it's no longer grounded. If you just plug a battery charger in and you're charging your battery, it's one thing, but if you're using it as shore power, and again, I'm not the expert here, and
Yeah,
But there's
that's
a
why
real
there'd be an engineer that
Yeah.
would look at the system, but this is a code requirement,
so it's a code requirement from the
Yes.
dry side.
yes.
All right.
The shunt trip breaker obviously would be the simplest method. When you get into the GFCI, then it gets Yeah, that would trigger the shunt trip, and- a lot more costly, and I've also, because I've been speaking of this with some of other harbor masters, and they've made me aware of some of the issues regarding the GFCI protection on the marinas as well. But it's just one of the requirements through the wire inspector.
Right.
So it would be something that we'd work with As part of an upgrade. with the engineer As part of an upgrade. to find out if this is indeed going to work, or Is it required now or part of an upgrade? Would it be required now or as part of an upgrade? he's
He's
looking...
recommending it, but it's not a requirement unless you actually change the service, right?
Yeah, we had an issue last year.
Okay.
We had two issues last year. One over the Maritime Center where, when the docks came in and out, there was a screw that was put back into the dock to hold the boards down.
And it went right
And
through-
it pierced into a wire. It made the screw hot.
Sure.
This one person found that one hot screw out of the 200,000 screws on that dock, and he found it twice, actually.
Of course he did.
The second, nobody was hurt.
Well, okay, good.
The second issue was at Cole Parkway, around 4th of July weekend. There's a cable tray that runs down along the gangway itself, and it has bushings, metal bushings, so that the conductors won't get cut. Well, when they made it an inch too short on either end. So with the heat, with the tides, and with the age of the conductors, one conductor, the insulation was cut, and it started to arc and spark, and it started to heat up the rest of the cable tray, which then, in turn, did it to the other cable on the other side.
Sure.
So we had a small electrical fire. The system was shut down, but again, it would have been shut down a
Easier,
lot
quicker to
quicker
shut down, sure.
if we had that button.
You're looking for one button or several
No,
buttons?
we're looking for the buttons at each
Okay.
at each marina.
At the top of each ramp, so it'll be at the
Yes.
top of the ramp.
Well, at the
At
Maritime
Copart.
Center, it would be at one location, even though there's two gangways. It would be where the whole electrical system would be. There'd be one button, be a big sign that says emergency electric shutdown. But again, this is something that needs to be designed.
All right. Dock de-icers.
Dock de-icers. When I came here, I was charged with finding a way or a place to put the floats. We also, I submitted for a grant that we received with the help of some other people, Nancy Durfee, Paul Scott, and Dick Eckhouse. And we were awarded this grant to put pilings in. So with the pilings, my idea is to leave the floats in the water, leave the electrical system together, leave the plumbing system together, and just blow out the pipes. Don't take the docks out of the water. Don't have to store them then. They're stored in the water. The marina can stay together. We could potentially close the marina on time on October 15th, but allow people to stay at an additional cost for another 15 or 30 days, whatever the town decides, to potentially offset some.
Why couldn't they stay?
We don't want to, a year. We really don't want them there in the winter. There's a lot of babysitting going on at that point. And we want to get most of the weight off the docks and off the pilings. But I have some photos. I actually brought in a gentleman from Metropolitan Yacht Club, and they're in Braintree, and he has been doing the dock de-icing for 20 years up there. And he's been sending me multiple photos. These aren't Metropolitan. The sailboats are another marina. This is Metropolitan Yacht Club. That's what Metropolitan, the layout of Metropolitan Yacht Club. Again, Metropolitan Yacht Club. Metropolitan Yacht Club. This is just different photos. The powerboat pictures are Metropolitan Yacht Club, the sailboats are another location. Except for this year.
So it kind of just gives an idea of
Yeah.
that's what has been thawed.
It keeps, what it does is it pulls.
Is it a bubbler system? or-
Yeah,
Is it- It's not a bubbler system, okay.
Not a bubble system. Bubble systems go down around the piling. It doesn't really address the docks.
Okay.
This addresses the whole area.
Weren't you going to drive pilings now?
Well, that's part of that grant. The pilings would go in. We wouldn't do this until the pilings are in.
That's what I mean, you're going to eliminate the chain.
Eliminate the chain and stone.
Good idea.
Because that way the marina's just going up and down. It's not swinging all around and up and down.
Good idea.
Can you explain this system real briefly without getting super technical? What is it, I mean, so
Yeah.
it circulates the water?
What it does is it pulls the warmer water up from down on the water table and raises it to the surface. And it also creates a current and a flow pattern. You can see it in some of the pictures where some of the water is being moved more vigorously than it normally would have been. And that does not allow the ice to grow.
No ice damage.
So without the ice growing, the marina is able to just float. There was some concern at the waterways meeting that when it all melted and you started getting ice flow, would the ice flow damage the docks? And if it's going to damage the docks, it's going to damage the pilings. At least this way, we're trying to protect the pilings while protecting the docks themselves. And what Bob Allen suggested was putting some of the de-icers out on the outer docks in the early spring, or actually in February, he said, February, March, and have them directing the water to keep the ice off the docks and away from it.
They're movable?
Yes, yeah, they're, I thought I printed off a picture of one of them. I thought it was in that pile. of one of the de-icers. They're about this big, they weigh about 40 pounds. It's a metal motor with a cage and a propeller, and they're just held on with line. They plug into a GFCI receptacle, and we'd store them in the attic at the harbor master's office.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I did do some, pretty extensive research. I had the gentleman from Casco, one of the de-icing companies, come out and look at the facility. He made some recommendations as to how many units. I've also seen these in use down on the Cape in some of the smaller marinas and private homes where they use them.
I did one in Marblehead.
Did you?
And 74 is for how many units?
It was about,
I see 51 units here.
yeah, 62 units at one location, 51 units at another location. And some receptacles.
Okay.
They'd have 50-foot power cords on them. They come standard with 25 feet, and we were originally going to put the 30-amp twist locks to make it really simple, then they wouldn't be GFCI protected. So it's a catch-22.
10 to 15-year life expectancy on these things.
And Bob Allen from Metropolitan actually said that he's been there 20 years and he has some of the originals still in use today. There's a lot of replaceable parts, the propeller, the zincs.
Now, what about, and you've been around long enough, what about the life expectancy of the docks sitting in the water that long?
The docks actually, it's better for them.
Better for them.
Because you're not drying them out?
Well, it's not drying them out
Getting them wet,
isn't
right?
really the problem.
Yeah.
Not abusing
It's when you're yanking them up and they're bending and flexing, they really don't like to come out of the water.
Very well. Any other questions?
I'm good.
Janet?
Nope, that sounds like a good project to me.
And it saves, it's about 20, before prevailing wage was about $23,000 to pull the floats out in the
Right.
fall and $22,000 to put them in the spring. So it could potentially save some money.
And you won't get all those Facebook posts of people saying, oh, why do we have to look at these?
That lifting, the strain
change.
is not good.
That,
change the
and
rope
also
pattern,
if one of those straps ever let go, or if a cleat let go,
Exactly.
it could kill somebody when they were coming out of the water. So there's a safety issue as well. And every time you take the electric system apart and put it back together, it really doesn't like that.
Very good.
Stephen, has the Waterways Commission reviewed that request and they are on board with it?
Yes, Waterways,
Okay.
we presented to Waterways, and it was, everybody was in agreement with it, and there was one abstention.
Are you going to raise fees to pay for this?
Not as of yet, although the consultant has looked at fee schedules for the slip customers.
It'll make your slips more desirable, right? Because of the...
Well, they're just, it wouldn't really change that a whole lot, but we could potentially get more customers that stay in, come earlier or stay later with an additional fee.
Great.
All right?
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other business that can reasonably become before the committee?
I like that.
It's on the agenda.
I know.
Then at 8:15, meeting adjourned.